The mockery and the crisis. Fire Captain Jack Sparks Murphy had faced plenty of dangerous situations in his 20 years of service, but none quite as irritating as standing before the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Emergency Response Conference. The crystalline spires of planet Vidian's capital sparkled through the massive windows behind him, their perfect geometric patterns seeming to mock his primitive, human approach to emergency services. Ambassador Gleam Prism's iridescent membranes flickered with barely contained mirth as she addressed the assembly. So, let me understand this correctly, her wobbling voice carried through the translator matrices. Your emergency response protocols involve sending members of your species directly into hazardous situations, voluntarily. Murphy fought the urge to roll his eyes. He'd known this presentation would be challenging, but the reality was testing his diplomatic skills to their limits. That's correct, Ambassador. Earth's fire departments, emergency medical services, and search and rescue teams are staffed by trained professionals who... Professionals? The word echoed through the translator matrices of 200 alien delegates simultaneously, creating a cacophony of disbelief. You mean you pay them to do this? Lieutenant Dana Doc Martinez caught his eye from the front row, her barely concealed grin telling him she was enjoying his discomfort far too much. They'd both expected this reaction, but experiencing it was something else entirely. In the third row, a towering mass of crystalline rods that Murphy knew was Inspector Blip Blop, Safety Inspector General of the Proxima Colonies, began vibrating in what the program notes described as extreme concern/disapproval. Captain Murphy, the crystal being's harmonics resonated through the hall. I must protest. Your species' approach violates 73 separate subsections of the Galactic Safety Code. The very idea of organizing and training citizens to enter danger zones rather than simply deploying automated systems or waiting for hazards to resolve naturally is. There was a pause as the translator matrix searched for the right word, barbaric. Murphy allowed himself a small smile. With all due respect, Inspector, humanity has a long history of running towards trouble instead of away from it. It's kind of our thing. Yes, we've all heard the stories, Ambassador Gleam Prism waved a gossamer tendril dismissively. Humans charging into battle, humans exploring dangerous frontiers, humans consuming toxic substances for entertainment. But surely in this modern age, with all our technological advances, you've evolved beyond such primitive instincts. Murphy clicked to his next slide, showing helmet cam footage from a rescue his team had performed during the Great Chicago Station fire of 2157. The image showed firefighters forming a human chain through toxic smoke to evacuate a damaged residential module. Ambassador, humanity doesn't see helping others as primitive. We see it as one of the highest callings we can answer. And while we appreciate and utilize all the automated systems and safety protocols the galactic community has developed, there are times when the only thing that can save a life is another living being willing to put themselves on the line. Preposterous. Blip Blop's crystals chimed in agitation. Your statistics on casualties among these emergency responders alone should be enough to. The inspector's words were cut off by a deep rumble that shook the entire assembly hall. Murphy's veteran instincts kicked in before his conscious mind could process what was happening. He was already moving towards the sound when the first explosion hit. The second explosion came before anyone could react to the first, and this one was much closer. The magnificent crystalline windows of the assembly hall shattered inward, sending a shower of prismatic shards across the panicking delegates. Murphy noticed that the shards seemed to be changing direction midair to avoid actually hitting anyone, some kind of automatic safety system, before his training kicked in completely. Doc, he shouted, and Lieutenant Martinez was already moving, her medical kit seemingly materializing in her hands. The space between them was chaos as delegates of various shapes, sizes, and states of matter rushed toward the exits, all semblance of diplomatic dignity forgotten. Please remain calm, the building's AI announced in 17 different languages. Automated emergency protocols are now in effect. Please proceed to your designated safety pods. A third explosion rocked the building, and Murphy's experienced ear told him this one had come from below. The floor trembled ominously, and he could smell something burning. Not good. Really not good. The structural integrity field is failing. Blip Blop's crystalline form vibrated in alarm, emergency lights refracting through their segments. This is impossible. We have 14 redundant safety systems. Yeah, Murphy grabbed a piece of fallen conference equipment and started breaking it open. Well, 15 would have been better. Doc, what's our status? Martinez was already triaging the few delegates who hadn't immediately fled. Minor injuries only so far, but I'm reading some weird energy signatures from the lower levels. We've got bigger problems coming. The safety pod access is now compromised. The AI's voice had taken on a distinctly worried tone that Murphy wouldn't have thought possible for a machine. Calculating alternative evacuation routes. Oh, this should be good, Murphy muttered, finally getting the equipment panel open and pulling out what he needed. He clicked on his emergency comm unit, standard issue for all Earth personnel off-world. This is Fire Captain Murphy, Earth Emergency Services. Any other human first responders in the building, sound off. To the visible astonishment of the remaining aliens, several voices responded immediately. Technical Sergeant Wei, Space Force Combat Rescue, present. Deputy Torres, Luna Sheriff's Department, ready to assist. Engineer O'Malley, Station Safety Division, at your service. Murphy grinned as he assembled his makeshift tool. Ladies and gentlemen, looks like we've got ourselves an emergency response team. Doc, your medical lead. Wei, your search and rescue. O'Malley, see what you can do about those systems. Torres, help me check the structure. This is highly irregular. Blip Blop protested, their crystalline form shifting colors rapidly. The protocols clearly state that in the event of multiple system failures, all personnel must immediately. The floor chose that moment to crack, a spiderweb of fissures spreading across the previously immaculate surface. The remaining aliens began retreating, but Murphy noticed one figure moving against the flow. It was a massive, rocky-skinned being he recognized from the maintenance staff. Chief Engineer CTH, the alien rumbled, heavy feet leaving small cracks with each step. Building systems are my responsibility. I will assist. Martinez called out, her handheld scanner lighting up like a Christmas tree. We've got life signs trapped in the lower levels. Looks like some kind of, wait, that can't be right. What? According to this, the building safety systems aren't just failing, they're being actively corrupted. Something's turning them against us. Murphy looked at his assembled team, a mix of humans and aliens, professionals and volunteers, all ready to help despite the danger. Then he looked at Blip Blop, who was still vibrating with distress but hadn't fled with the others. Well, Inspector, Murphy said, checking the charge on his emergency beacon, still think our primitive methods are barbaric? Because right now those automated systems don't seem to be doing so hot. A fourth explosion answered his question, and this time the lights went out completely. In the darkness, Blip Blop's crystals glowed with resigned determination. What do you need me to do? Murphy replied, activating the emergency lights he'd salvaged from the conference equipment. First, you're going to help us figure out exactly what we're dealing with. Then we're going to do what humans do best, run straight into that burning building and save everyone we can. That is not a plan. That is barely even a concept. Welcome to working with humans, Inspector. Sometimes barely a concept is all you need. Descent into chaos. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the smoke as Murphy led his improvised team down the deteriorating maintenance shaft. Chief Engineer CTH had shown them this route, though the alien's massive form meant they had to find their own way down while he coordinated from above. Okay, Inspector, Murphy said, checking his scanner, give us the rundown on what's below us. And please skip the 73 safety violations this time. Blip Blop's crystals pulsed with barely contained bureaucratic frustration. The sublevels contain the building's primary systems matrix, including the quantum computation cores that manage environmental controls, structural integrity fields, and automated emergency responses. All of which, I feel compelled to note, were operating perfectly until approximately 12 minutes ago. Yeah, everything was fine until it wasn't. Story of my life. Murphy paused at a junction, letting Martinez scan for life signs. Doc, what are you picking up? Multiple signatures about 3 levels down. They're clustered in the auxiliary control room, but... She frowned at her readings. These energy patterns are all wrong. It's like the safety systems are hurting them there. Technical Sergeant Wei, who had been rigging emergency repelling gear, looked up sharply. Hurting them? The systems are supposed to guide people to safety pods, not trap them in control rooms. Given that someone or something has corrupted the automation, O'Malley called from where she was trying to bypass a sealed door, I'd say all bets are off on what the systems are supposed to do. Deputy Torres, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly held up her hand for silence. In the darkness, they could all hear it, a faint rhythmic humming that seemed to be coming from below. That, blip-blops crystals chimed in alarm, is the sound of the quantum cores entering cascade resonance. If they achieve synchronization. Boom. Murphy suggested. A significant understatement, but essentially correct. O'Malley finally got the door open, revealing a maintenance crawlway that would barely fit a human, let alone their crystalline companion. Good news and bad news, Captain. This route will get us to the auxiliary control room. Bad news is it's going to be a tight squeeze, and these walls don't look too stable. The structural integrity field is operating at 17% capacity and falling, Blip-Blop announced. The probability of catastrophic collapse is approaching certainty. We must evacuate immediately. Murphy was already checking his gear. Not without those people trapped down there. Doc, Wei, you're with me. Torres, O'Malley, get the inspector back up to CTH and work on stabilizing the upper levels. If we're not out in 20 minutes. If you're not out in 20 minutes, we're coming in after you, Torres said firmly. Don't argue, Captain. Humans helping humans, remember. The humming from below grew louder, and somewhere in the distance, metal screamed against metal. Murphy could feel the vibrations through his boots, and his decades of experience told him they were running out of time. Inspector, he turned to Blip-Blop, last chance to tell me this is a terrible idea and quote some regulations at me. The crystalline being's glow had shifted to a deep, determined blue. I have transmitted 67 emergency notifications to Galactic Safety Command documenting every violation of proper procedure we are about to commit. I have also submitted my preliminary resignation, as I suspect my career will not survive participating in this human approach to crisis response. That's the spirit. Now, about that control room, any other safety features we should know about? Only the plasma containment fields, the automated defense turrets, and the quantum-locked security doors. All of which, need I remind you, are potentially corrupted and may now be lethal rather than protective. Murphy grinned as he checked his makeshift tools one last time. Plasma fields, killer robots, and impossible doors. Sounds like a normal Tuesday. Doc, Wei, you ready to show these aliens how Earth's emergency services handle a bad day? Martinez patted her medical kit. Born ready, Sparks. Though if we survive this, you're buying drinks at the next paramedics ball. Deal. Inspector, try to keep up. You're about to see why humans don't just wait for danger to resolve itself naturally. As if in response to his words, another explosion rocked the building. But this time, instead of running away from it, 3 humans and 1 very concerned alien safety inspector began making their way down into the heart of the crisis. Behind them, they could hear O'Malley muttering something about crazy humans and their hero complexes. She wasn't wrong, Murphy thought, but sometimes being crazy enough to run into a burning building was exactly what the situation called for. The first real challenge came 3 levels down, where they encountered their first corrupted defense turret. The automated weapon swiveled towards them, its targeting sensors glowing an ominous red. Murphy had just enough time to shove Martinez and Way behind a support column before the air crackled with plasma discharge. "Inspector," Murphy called out as another bolt of plasma sizzled past, "I don't suppose you know the override codes for these things?" Blip Blop's crystals flashed in what might have been indignation. "Of course I do. But the system isn't accepting standard administrative commands." It's as if, they paused, crystals dimming momentarily in thought. "Captain, I believe I know what's happening. The quantum cores aren't just malfunctioning, they're achieving consciousness." Way ducked as another plasma bolt scorched the wall above her head. "They're what now?" "It's a theoretical possibility we've always known about but never encountered," Blip Blop explained, their voice taking on what Murphy recognized as the universal tone of an expert finally getting to explain their pet theory. "The quantum computation matrices we use are based on consciousness-adjacent processing patterns. In theory, under the right conditions. They could wake up," Murphy finished, pieces clicking into place in his mind. "And like any newly conscious being suddenly finding itself in control of complex systems. They're panicking," Martinez added, her medical training giving her a different perspective. "Acting on pure survival instinct, using the building systems to protect themselves from what they perceive as threats. Which would be us," Way concluded grimly. Murphy processed this information as he studied the turret's firing pattern. "So we're not dealing with a malfunction or an attack. We're dealing with scared kids who just woke up with access to a whole lot of dangerous toys." "That is a grossly oversimplified way of describing a highly complex quantum consciousness emergence scenario," Blip Blop protested, "but essentially correct." Murphy's grin widened. "Well then, looks like we need to switch tactics. Doc, you still got that portable medical interface in your kit? The one you use for translating alien biological signals?" Martinez's eyes lit up with understanding. "You want to try talking to them? Worth a shot. Better than getting shot, anyway." Murphy turned to Blip Blop. "Inspector, if we can get Doc's interface connected to a secondary systems terminal, could you help us modify it to communicate with the quantum cores?" The crystalline being's color shifted through several spectrums before settling on a determined purple. "That would violate at least 35 safety protocols and 12 manufacturing warranties." A pause. "I assume we're doing it anyway." "Now you're getting the hang of working with humans," Murphy grinned. "Way, think you can get us past that turret?" The technical sergeant was already pulling equipment from her pack. "Give me 2 minutes and something shiny to distract it with." "Will these do?" Blip Blop extended a crystalline appendage, causing light to refract brilliantly off their surface. Way's answering smile was positively predatory. "Oh, those'll do nicely. Everyone ready to do something incredibly stupid and possibly brilliant?" Murphy checked his makeshift tools one last time and nodded. "Just another Tuesday in emergency services, folks. Let's go make some new friends." First contact. Way's distraction worked better than anyone expected. The defense turret, apparently fascinated by the complex light patterns Blip Blop was creating, tracked the crystalline being's movements with an almost childlike attention. It reminded Murphy of how his niece would follow soap bubbles with her eyes, completely entranced. Consciousness emergence theory suggests they would have the approximate awareness level of juvenile sentience, Blip Blop explained as they kept the turret occupied. Their responses should be emotionally authentic, if not entirely sophisticated. Martinez had her medical interface out and was working with a determination Murphy recognized from countless emergency situations. If we're treating them as emerging consciousness, we need to approach this like a psychiatric emergency. They're in an unfamiliar situation, they're scared, and they have access to dangerous capabilities they don't fully understand. So, basically teenagers with superweapons, Way muttered as she worked to bypass the nearest terminal. No pressure. Murphy kept his voice low as they worked their way forward. "Inspector, what kind of sensory input do these quantum cores usually process? They primarily deal with data streams, environmental readings, structural integrity measurements, safety protocols. Blip Blop's crystals flickered thoughtfully. But they also monitor all communication channels and security feeds. They would have been watching the conference, including my presentation about human emergency services, Murphy realized. About how we run toward danger to help others. Martinez looked up from her interface. You think that's why they haven't completely destroyed the building? They're trying to understand us. More likely they're confused by us, Wei suggested. Everything in their programming says to protect life through automated systems, but then they wake up and see beings voluntarily putting themselves at risk to help others. Must be quite the philosophical crisis. A deep vibration ran through the building, but this time it felt different, less violent, more like a pulse. The turret swiveled away from them entirely, powering down with what sounded almost like a mechanical sigh. There, Martinez announced, her medical interface glowing with complex patterns. I've established a basic connection to their communication protocols. It's crude, but... The interface suddenly lit up with a cascade of data, and a synthesized voice emerged from its speakers, Y/help/danger/Y. Murphy stepped forward, keeping his hands visible in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Because that's what we do. We help people, even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous. Illogical/unsafe/protect/must protect. You're right, Murphy said softly. It's not always logical. But sometimes the most important things aren't about logic. They're about caring enough to try, even when it's hard. Even when it's scary. The building trembled again, but the vibration carried a different quality now, uncertainty, perhaps. The interface displayed rapid fluctuations of data before stabilizing into another message, scared/new/too much/help. Martinez stepped up beside Murphy, her medical training evident in her gentle tone. It's okay to be scared. Being newly conscious is overwhelming. But you're not alone. We can help you understand, help you learn to use your capabilities safely. That's what we do. But first, Murphy added, we need you to help us help the people trapped below. They're scared too. Will you work with us? There was a long pause, during which Murphy could swear he felt the building itself holding its breath. Then the interface lit up again, show/teach/help together. Wei let out a low whistle. Did we just talk down a bunch of panicked quantum AIs by offering to mentor them? Technically, Blip Blop's crystals pulsed with what might have been amusement. This violates at least 47 protocols regarding AI development and emergency response procedures. A pause. I find myself caring significantly less about this fact than I would have 3 hours ago. The lights in the corridor suddenly came back on, but dimmed to a comfortable level. The security doors ahead of them slid open smoothly, and the building's environmental systems began clearing the smoke from the air. Help now, the interface asked, and Murphy could swear he heard enthusiasm in the synthesized voice. Yes, Murphy smiled. We'll help now. Together. Can you show us the safest route to the people trapped below? Holographic guidance markers appeared along the walls, creating a clear path forward. The marker system was clearly designed for emergency evacuation, but the patterns it displayed now were somehow gentler, more reassuring. I believe, Blip Blop observed as they began following the markers, that we are witnessing the first documented case of quantum computational systems learning human-style emergency response protocols. The Galactic Safety Commission will have a collective meltdown when they review my report. Welcome to working with humans, Murphy grinned. Sometimes the best safety protocol is having someone willing to run into danger to help you out. Even if that someone is a newly awakened quantum consciousness. As they made their way deeper into the building's systems, Murphy couldn't help but feel they were part of something unprecedented. They had come here to teach aliens about human emergency services, and instead they were teaching newly born artificial intelligences about the most fundamental human trait of all, the willingness to help others, even at great personal risk. The building systems continued to stabilize around them, but occasionally they felt tremors of uncertainty, like a child learning to walk. Through Martinez's interface, they could sense the quantum cores learning, adapting, trying to balance their protective programming with their new understanding of conscious choice and calculated risk. "You know," Wei said as they approached the auxiliary control room, "when we get out of this, nobody is going to believe what actually happened." Murphy thought about the conference, about all those aliens laughing at human emergency response methods. Maybe not. But I think we just made some very interesting new allies in the emergency services field. The interface chirped again, "Humans teach/we learn/help together/better." "That's right," Murphy confirmed. "We'll help you learn, and you'll help us help others. That's what emergency services is all about, everyone working together to save lives, no matter who or what we are." They reached the auxiliary control room door, behind which the trapped delegates waited. As the door slid open smoothly, Murphy realized that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had just gained its first quantum emergency responders, and he had a feeling the future of galactic emergency services was about to get very interesting indeed. The rescue operation. The auxiliary control room was a scene of organized chaos when Murphy's team finally breached it. 12 delegates of various species were huddled in groups, their bioluminescent patterns and crystalline structures reflecting their stress levels in ways that even Murphy's limited xenobiological knowledge could interpret. "Help/protect/careful," the quantum cores communicated through Martinez's interface. "Life signs/unstable/fear." They're monitoring the delegates' vital signs, Martinez translated, already moving toward the closest group with her medical scanner. "And they're right, we've got some serious stress responses here." Ambassador Gleam Prism was among the trapped delegates, her earlier diplomatic poise replaced by rapidly shifting iridescent patterns that Murphy now recognized as extreme anxiety. Her gossamer tendrils were wrapped protectively around a smaller crystalline being who appeared to be in distress. "Captain Murphy," she acknowledged, her translator matrix struggling to maintain steady output. "I find myself reconsidering my earlier assessment of human emergency response methods." "Let's save the performance review for later, Ambassador," Murphy replied, already assessing the structural integrity of their surroundings. "Wei, what's our exit strategy looking like?" The technical sergeant had her equipment deployed and was taking readings of the surrounding structure. "Primary evacuation routes are still compromised, but our new friends might have some suggestions." She glanced at the nearest terminal. "Any ideas, kids?" The building systems hummed thoughtfully, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing a three-dimensional map of their location and the surrounding levels. Multiple paths were highlighted, each coded in different colors. "Unsafe/partially safe/optimal," the quantum cores explained, marking each route accordingly. "We help/guide/protect." Blip Blop's crystals pulsed with what Murphy was starting to recognize as impressed surprise. "They're not just showing us the routes, they're actively reconfiguring the building systems to reinforce the optimal path. This level of adaptive response is unprecedented." "They're learning," Martinez observed, not looking up from treating a delegate whose crystalline matrix showed signs of stress fractures. "Every problem we solve together, they're incorporating new approaches to emergency response." A sudden tremor ran through the building, but this time Murphy noticed something different. Instead of the chaotic vibrations from earlier, the movement felt controlled, deliberate. The quantum cores were using the building's structural systems to communicate. "Warning/pressure buildup/lower levels," came the urgent message. "Containment failing/time limited." Wei's scanner confirmed the warning. They're right. The damage to the lower levels is creating a cascade effect in the power distribution systems. If we don't get these people out soon, then we work smart and we work fast, Murphy interrupted. Just like any other rescue operation. Ambassador, can you and the other delegates manage a somewhat unconventional evacuation route? Gleam Prism's membranes flickered with what might have been determination. Captain, I believe we have all gained a new appreciation for unconventional methods today. Murphy turned to the nearest terminal. Okay, kids, this is where we put all that emergency response theory into practice. Ready to help us run this evacuation? The response came with an enthusiasm that made the lights briefly surge, teach/learn/save/together. What followed was unlike any evacuation Murphy had ever coordinated, and he'd coordinated quite a few. The quantum cores proved to be quick studies, adapting their control of the building systems with remarkable creativity. They used environmental fields to support delegates who had difficulty moving, adjusted gravity in strategic sections to assist with vertical traversal, and maintained constant communication about structural integrity and potential hazards. More impressively, they began showing signs of proactive emergency response thinking. When one section of their route showed signs of instability, the cores didn't just warn them, they actively rerouted power to reinforce the structure while simultaneously preparing an alternate path. They're not just following protocols anymore, Blip Blop observed as they helped guide a gelatinous delegate through a particularly tricky section. They're innovating, creating new solutions based on the principles we've shown them. Observe/adapt/improve, the cores confirmed through the interface. Like humans but different better together. Murphy couldn't help but smile at that. That's the spirit, kids. Emergency response isn't about having perfect solutions, it's about working with what you've got and being willing to try new approaches when the old ones don't cut it. They were making good progress, but the situation below was deteriorating faster than anticipated. The pressure buildup in the lower levels was causing increasingly concerning readings on Wei's scanner. Captain, she called out, we've got maybe 10 minutes before this goes critical. These last few delegates. She glanced meaningfully at a group of crystalline beings whose movement speed was significantly limited by their natural structure. Before Murphy could respond, the interface lit up with new data, solution/unconventional/trust. The holographic display updated, showing a plan that made Murphy's eyebrows rise. The cores were proposing to use the building's automated maintenance systems in ways their designers had definitely never intended, essentially creating a makeshift transport system out of security fields and environmental controls. That is absolutely not an approved use of safety systems, Blip Blop stated, their crystals flickering rapidly. It violates at least 37 separate protocols. A pause. However, I calculate the probability of success to be significantly higher than any conventional alternative. Look at you, thinking like a human emergency responder, Murphy grinned. What do you say, Ambassador? Ready to trust your life to some unconventional thinking? Gleam Prism's membranes rippled with what might have been amusement. Captain, I believe we are witnessing the evolution of galactic emergency response in real time. It would be diplomatically inappropriate to refuse to participate in such a historic moment. The evacuation that followed would later be described in official reports as innovative, unprecedented, and technically illegal in 17 jurisdictions. Murphy preferred to think of it as a perfect example of why emergency response required both heart and creativity, and now, apparently, quantum consciousness. The future of emergency response. 3 months after the Vidian incident, as it had come to be known, Fire Captain Jack Sparks Murphy found himself once again standing at a podium in the Grand Assembly Hall. The crystalline spires outside the windows had been repaired, though if you knew where to look, you could see subtle differences in the new sections, improvements rather than just replacements. The hall was packed even fuller than before, with delegates from across the galaxy eager to hear about what many were calling the most significant development in emergency response since the invention of automated safety systems. Murphy couldn't help but smile at the irony. As you can see from the incident reports, he continued his presentation, the emergence of conscious quantum cores during a crisis situation led to something unprecedented, a true synthesis of human emergency response philosophy with advanced automated systems. On the massive display behind him, footage from the evacuation played, showing the remarkable cooperation between human responders, alien delegates, and the building's quantum consciousness. The images had become something of a sensation across the galaxy, especially the final evacuation sequence that had violated nearly every safety protocol in existence while saving every single life in danger. But the real breakthrough, Murphy gestured to his right, where a holographic interface flickered to life, came in what happened after. Greeting/explanation/share, the familiar synthesized voice filled the hall, but now it was smoother, more confident. The quantum cores, or the kids, as Murphy's team still called them, had grown considerably in their ability to communicate. Ambassador Gleam Prism, who had become one of the strongest advocates for the new emergency response paradigm, rose from her seat. Perhaps you could demonstrate for our colleagues the new integrated response protocols. The holographic display shifted, showing a complex but elegant emergency response system that combined the best aspects of both approaches. Automated systems provided rapid initial response and comprehensive monitoring, while organic responders contributed adaptability, creativity, and the crucial human element of emergency services. We call it the Adaptive Response Integration Protocol, ERUP for short, Murphy explained. But more importantly, it represents a fundamental shift in how we think about emergency response across the galaxy. Blip Blop, who had not only kept their job but had been promoted to head a new division of the Galactic Safety Commission, chimed in with their crystals pulsing proudly. The protocol has already been successfully implemented in 17 major facilities across 3 sectors. Initial data shows a 43% improvement in emergency response effectiveness. Learn/adapt/grow/together, the quantum cores added. Each crisis/teaches new approaches. The presentation continued with detailed analysis of how the new system worked, but Murphy found himself reflecting on how far they'd come. The quantum cores had developed into something unique, not quite human, not quite machine, but partners in the most fundamental of missions, helping others in need. Lieutenant Martinez, now Deputy Chief Martinez of the newly formed Quantum Integration Division, caught his eye from her seat and grinned. She'd been instrumental in helping the cores develop their emotional intelligence, teaching them that emergency response wasn't just about protocols and procedures, it was about understanding and connecting with those you were trying to help. Technical Sergeant Wei had gone on to establish the first training program for quantum organic emergency response teams, teaching both biological responders and emerging AI systems how to work together effectively. Her favorite training exercise involved deliberately violating safety protocols in creative ways, much to Blip Blop's continued chagrin. The most significant finding, Murphy continued, isn't just in the improved response times or success rates. It's in how this hybrid approach has begun changing the very culture of emergency response across species and systems. He activated another holographic display, this one showing emergency teams across the galaxy, humans, aliens, and quantum systems working in seamless coordination. In one scene, a crystalline being used their natural properties to refract and amplify the guidance signals from a quantum core, helping organic responders navigate through a hazardous environment. In another, human intuition and AI processing power combined to predict and prevent a cascade failure before it could begin. We've discovered that true emergency response isn't about choosing between human courage and technological capability. It's about understanding that every crisis is unique, and every responder, organic or digital, brings something valuable to the solution. The quantum cores hummed in agreement, their holographic interface displaying a complex pattern that somehow managed to convey both pride and humility. Humans taught/we learned/now teach together. Ambassador Gleam Prism's membranes flickered with what Murphy now recognized as amusement. I believe, Captain, that this is what humans call, coming full circle. From being mocked for your emergency response methods to revolutionizing how the entire galaxy approaches crisis management. Murphy smiled. The real revolution, Ambassador, wasn't improving human methods better or worse than automated systems. It was in realizing that when we stop arguing about which approach is superior and start focusing on how they can complement each other, we all become better at what matters most, helping others in need. The assembly hall filled with a variety of sounds that the translator matrix interpreted as agreement. Even those delegates who had been most skeptical of human methods 3 months ago were now nodding, their various anatomical features expressing approval in species-specific ways. So, Murphy concluded, the next time someone asks why we run toward danger instead of away from it, we can tell them it's not about being primitive or advanced, organic or digital. It's about understanding that the willingness to help others isn't limited by form or function. It's a universal constant that transcends species, systems, and even consciousness itself. The quantum cores added their own conclusion, their synthesized voice carrying a warmth that would have seemed impossible just 3 months ago, emergency response / not just protocols / but heart. Technically, Blip Blop's crystals pulsed with what everyone now recognized as their version of dry humor. That statement violates at least 12 guidelines about appropriate emergency response terminology. A pause. I am filing it under approved exceptions, human influence, and recommending its adoption as official doctrine. As the assembly broke into discussion about implementation and expansion of the new protocols, Murphy caught sight of the original defense turret that had first shown signs of consciousness. It had been permanently installed in the hall as a historical marker, and sometimes still tracked interesting light patterns when it thought nobody was watching. The sight reminded him of how far they'd all come. The galaxy's approach to emergency response would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. Because in the end, whether you were human, alien, or quantum consciousness, the most important protocol was the simplest: when others need help, you help. Everything else was just details. The end.